I graduated when I was 23, I think. So I sort of was in a state of mind where I was sort of not quite ready to settle into, practice for the rest of my life. I think there's an opportunity there to say what else is out there, what other opportunities are out there, and explore some of those.
Hey guys, welcome to the CPD Junkie podcast, where we bring you interviews with dentists sharing their CPD stories and journeys from around Australia. Hey everyone, I'm Laurence Doan, and you're tuning into CPD Junkie podcast. Tonight we're joined by Dr Michael Burgess. He is a Maxillofacial Surgeon in Brisbane who completed his dentistry at Sydney Uni in 2004 and worked with his dad in Newcastle for 2 years before beginning his pathway into Maxillofacial Surgery, completing his medicine at Newcastle University and then Intern and Residency in the Hunter, New England region. Now working in Brisbane with the subspecialty interest in TMJ surgery and running private practice, as well as working at the Mater Public and Queensland Children's Hospital. Dr. Michael Burgess, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
So before we dive into your dental journey, at the time of this recording, Brisbane has just been hit by a freak storm and severe flooding. Can you share what your experience has been so far, and considering one of your offices is so close to the Brisbane City River?
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting week. We actually timed it very well. We were out of Brisbane for the bulk of the rain. We were at a friend's wedding down in Kiama down south near Sydney. So we were watching it from afar. I had the Arlo cameras out and watching the rain, and it was pretty phenomenal. Even over the cameras, you could hear how heavy the rain was. And we've got friends locally that were sort of isolated. Luckily, no one that we know of that's been majorly affected by it. But always the advice would be to buy on a hill in Brisbane, that's for sure.
Yeah, I wish you guys in Brisbane all the best during these tough times. So you graduated from USyd in 2004 and worked for your dad, Dr. Laurence Burgess in Newcastle. What was that like?
It was a really good experience. Dad had set up a great practice with a group of really good people and a couple of senior dentists, and more junior people, and then me as the most junior. And I think it was a really good crew. And having Dad there as well as a mentor was amazing. I think someone that you could just feel very comfortable going to. And I think and that transition from uni to work was probably made a bit easier for me because I had Dad there, which was great. And I think as soon as I got back to Newcastle, recovered from my hangover in Sydney and from the graduation, and then got back to Newcastle and started work as soon as I could, and sort of threw myself into it, and it was great. It was a really good time. It's really a nerve-wracking experience that everyone goes through when they start practice. You finish dental school and you've got no one looking over your shoulder, and that's a really scary time. But I feel quite lucky that I had that experience. So.
Yeah, you had that support and that guidance. So what are some of his teachings?
A lot of it, to be honest, was dealing with patients and, what's the best way to manage difficult situations with patients. And I think, we do a lot of practical stuff coming through dental school, and not a lot of it is day-to-day management of patients, how to charge, how to, deal with difficult patients, how to manage that 4:30 p.m. emergency that turns up and your staff are angry with you for having to stay back, and all the stuff that comes with managing a practice from that point of view is a lot of it. I think obviously there was small procedural things that I would ask him about in terms of Dad was very good at doing a lot of oral surgery, so he was always really good to have there as someone who could bail you out if there was an issue. I've pushed a root into a sinus once, and as I'm sure many people have, and you find yourself in a situation where you've sort of got to deal with that, and it's how you manage those situations. The difficult situations are the ones that really, really help, and I think that was something that I was very lucky to have Dad there. I could just knock on the window and say, "Mate, I need a bit of help here."
Yeah, and is that what kind of led you to deciding to specialize? Like,
I think so. I wasn't a great student when I was in dentistry. I was preoccupied with playing footy and drinking far too much, and I didn't push myself enough when I was dental school. And part of me sort of thought I hadn't really taken advantage of the opportunity that I had, and I had a great opportunity at Sydney Uni. When I finished and did first year of practice, I sat the primaries, the college primaries, and got through that. I still don't know really how I got through it, but I got through it, and that sort of spurred me on to go, well, maybe I could do some more study. And at the time, I was very young. I graduated when I was 23, I think. So I sort of was in a state of mind where I was sort of not quite ready to settle into, practice for the rest of my life. I think there's an opportunity there to say what else is out there, what other opportunities are out there, and explore some of those.
Yeah. Well, I mean, were you interested in other things as well outside of oral surgery, or was it kind of like, your dad was really good at it, that kind of really kicked it in, and then you did the primaries? How did that all come about?
I really enjoyed our oral surgery terms at uni, and the times that we did it in the maxillofacial team at Westmead. That was probably the thing that I really did enjoy in dentistry. I think there wasn't anything else that necessarily stood out to me as something that I really wanted to do. But the pathway to MaxFac seemed pretty daunting. So, and not being a great student, I was fairly certain I wouldn't be the person that would be able to, be picked out of a group to go and do that sort of specialty. But I still sort of turned the wheels over and actually just sort of did things to progress myself and put myself into a situation where I potentially could go down that path if I wanted to, and that's how it started. So doing the primaries in the college was the first step in that, and then looking at potential opportunities outside of that. So
yeah, and then you started looking around for a degree to kind of go, and it coincidentally you end up at Newcastle University.
Well, it's funny how everything works out. So I did a surgical job at Prince of Wales Hospital, which was a maxillofacial job as a dentist. So you were basically a junior dentist in the unit. We had a great team at Prince of Wales Hospital, and you worked with the consultants there as a dentist, but you were doing a lot of oral surgery, and it was a really special job from that perspective. It's hard now to get exposure to jobs like that, where you can get surgical exposure and access to that without going fully fledged into it. So I was very lucky to get that opportunity, and as a part of that job, I applied for accreditation on the maxillofacial training program, had started doing some research, and had started to just chip away at the possibility of doing MaxFacs, and interviewed and did the process. And then luckily a person that was meant to be doing the job at Newcastle in the medical, so there was a lateral entry path at that stage in Newcastle, and the person that was meant to get that job didn't do it, and I was the next in line. So it was funny because I until I was offered the job in the position in medicine, I hadn't, I was still thinking about what I was going to do. It sort of popped up as an opportunity, and I was really lucky that popped up. Obviously I accepted it within about 48 seconds, but it was something that fell in my lap, and I'll always look back as something, as to say, well, that was really an opportunity that I had to take, and I was really lucky to get that opportunity.
Yeah, some things happen for a reason, hey?
Absolutely. It's funny how things pan out, and that wasn't the only time, in my pathway that happened. And I think everyone has similar times and opportunities, wherever they get to, that define that for them.
So I guess you leave the party life at dental school, you get into work, and now you're back into the studies of things, surrounded by kids that are super keen to go hang out and all of that. But how did you find, going through the course at that time? Because you're older, more mature at this point, right?
Well, that's arguable. There's plenty of people around me that would say that I'm still immature at 40 years of age. So I mean, part of my thought process about going back to uni and doing that was that I wasn't, fully ready to be a professional doing a full professional job and working in a professional environment. I was still, playing a bit of footy and enjoying a beer, even though I still do. But it was a great opportunity to I guess stagger that progress. Although going back to medical school is difficult. You see your mates. I remember driving behind one of my mates who was driving along his new BMW, and I was in this bent up Toyota Corolla that I'd had for a number of years. But I was more than happy with being back at medical school. And I think I worked as a dentist for Dad on a Saturday and a Sunday. So we used to do after hours sessions on a Saturday and Sunday to get through medical school. And again, that's a huge opportunity that I had from having Dad, was that I could be there on a Saturday and Sunday, earn a bit of cash. And the after hours emergency stuff is actually really good to have as a max fact. You see your avulse teeth and your acute infections and things like that are really good to have as a potential exposure as you're going into that sort of training. So I was lucky to have that.
Yeah, and around this time, this is the same time that you end up on a TV show called Young Doctors, is that right?
Yes, that's right. I've got plenty of mates that still get stuck into me about being the weird, awkward dude out the back of the promo shots on Young Doctors. But that was at the end of it was the start of my medical training. So I did medical school and was doing my internship at John Hunter, and at the time they were filming a series called Young Doctors there. So you would turn up to your shift with a film crew and a sound guy and a hospital rep. It wasn't too bad on night shift, actually. It gave you some company. You'd have 4 or 5 people following you around while you were doing night shift, wandering the corridors, and it was a fun experience and a good crew that we had at the time, and really enjoyed that. And I think we had 2 episodes on Channel 9, and then we got shafted for Michael Jackson's lawyer, or doctor, getting done. So it was a very short-lived TV show with I don't think I even made it to E-grade celebrity in Newcastle at the time. So
now you got called Dr. Burgess, wasn't it? And they typecast you as footy.
Yeah.
Right? And they were shooting you at they got you with your mates at the pub chanting or something like that.
Yeah, the local pub loved it. They hadn't seen anything like that in a long time. But it was funny. I think they obviously try to typecast people into certain personalities, and I was the footy buffhead. I think at one stage they said to me that they've got more footage of me with a beer in my hand than actually doing any work. So it wasn't a good thing.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think it's nice to have for prosperity. I've got lots of signed DVD sets I can't get rid of if anyone wants them. So
yeah, because they recorded was it 6 of you guys together? You guys were in the same household or something like that? Is that how it was working?
Yeah, they put us up in a house in Newcastle, this big old mansion, and we all lived there and went to work and came back again, and yeah, it was good fun. I think, and we all got on pretty well. This house was amazing. We were all doing different jobs at the time. Rory was doing emergency, Kate was doing obs and gynae, I was doing general medicine. Yeah, and but it was really nice to have that sort of camaraderie at the time and go through it. And in retrospect, it was a really good time, fun. And my mate's got a few free beers out of it, so they're happy with that. So
yeah. So at this time, you're finishing your time at the Hunter New England in 2013, right? You're moving on at this point to Westmead, is that right?
So 2013, yeah, I went to Westmead. So I was super lucky with the guys that I had in Sydney that looked after me from a consultant perspective. We had a really good crew in Sydney that I had known from Prince of Wales, as well as working in Newcastle. It's amazing, you see, as you go along, you build up these relationships with people as you go through and as you go from job to job, and these people pop back up again, and looked after me, and offered me an unaccredited job at the time at Westmead, which means you work as almost a registrar, a maxillofacial registrar, but it just doesn't count towards your time on the program. And that was a great year. I did some max facs, and they let me go and do a bit of plastic surgery at one stage, which was a really good experience. I think opening up your breadth of what you've seen is so important for when you get to the final position where you finish your whatever training you're doing. I think having the opportunity to work in those different units and go through that has given me a really nice broad breadth to my experience, which helps me. Helps you on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. The more stuff you've seen, obviously, the more you can handle. So that was great, and I was very, I keep saying it, but I was lucky to have the guys there that were happy to help me and allow me to do those jobs, and had a great time. Preparing for trying to get onto the Max Fax program, which is never easy.
Yeah, and so what happens at that point?
Well, you've got to get a portfolio together effectively. You've got to have a proven record of experience of the jobs you've done. You've got to have done courses, so you have to have done an acute trauma course as well as ICU courses, and you have to have done all your time. So you have to have done your internship as well as time as a resident. And there's a thing called a surgery in general year, which is a number of rotations, an ICU term or acute general surgical term or a cardiothoracic term, which count towards what they call surgery in general, which is effectively giving you a really broad level of experience as you go into Max Fax training. Because once you go into training, you're sort of pigeonholed into what you do. So getting the most amount of experience as you can before you enter that is really important. And then you line up and you interview. So you turn up to, when I did, I think it was at the Hilton in Sydney, I think, and you walk into a couple of very intimidating rooms. There's 4 or 5 consultants sitting across a table interviewing you, and a few lay people, and firing questions at you. And I think it's a hard thing to prepare for. I know guys that are really good at it and know how to do it really well, and I'm not one of those. And you get questions. I think I got a question about, do I think the Queen should abdicate from the throne? And you sort of get thrown into this situation where you've got to come up with an answer to that in a structured, formal way that shows a really solid thought process. And I think I bombed that big time. I think it's one of those things that, these processes are there for a reason. They are really good ways to pick out people that can cope under stress and pressure. And as hard and as torturous as that process was, it's a very good process. I think it's something that obviously stood the test of time, but it's something that is and not a strength of mine, definitely.
Yeah. And then, so you're having a tough time at these interviews. So then what happens? Is it that you somehow end up in Perth?
Yeah. So I missed out on a job in the first round of offers from that interview. I think because I just bombed it. I was I'll say it again, I was lucky to have mates in WA working at the time who stuck their head out and vouched for me and said that I wasn't such a bad guy. And someone pulled out of the training program again. So this happened to me to get into medicine, and then this happened to me again to get a job over in Perth. And someone pulled out, or there was some issue with the job, and I got a second round offer of a position over in WA. And yeah, it was, again, I was lucky. It popped up, and it was an opportunity that I had to take. And my lovely wife just said, "Yep, let's go." So we just packed up and went to WA from Sydney, and that was a big call at the time, because I think we had about 4 weeks' notice to get over there. But it was Perth was amazing. It was just such a great experience, and probably getting out of New South Wales and going to another state again was one of those things that's a breadth of experience, which is so valuable. I think I've spoken to other trainees about going to different states and getting different exposures, and I think it's really important, because even though we all live in the same country, well, people would argue whether WA is the same country as Australia at the moment, but we do live in the same country, but people do things differently. It's not that things are necessarily done the same in Brisbane as they are in Melbourne, as they are in Perth or Sydney. So getting that breadth of experience purely just by moving around, even within Australia, is important and was valuable for me.
Yeah. So how did you find that? Like, what in particular did you find was changing? Was it the culture? Was it the things that you were doing? The types of procedures? What was different? The different thought process, the different teachings, like.
So coming from New South Wales, probably the closer interaction that we had with the consultants and the bosses over there. There was a really good group of young consultants who were just enthusiastic and awesome. And the teaching was great. We had really good teaching. We had involvement from the consultants actively. And then I think, change in environment was just great. I guess the excitement of being in a different city and living in a different city and how that worked. And I think the trauma in WA is like you'll see nowhere else. WA is the only place where I've had people, die in emergency departments in front of me. It's sort of, the trauma is next level from that point of view. It's got such a large catchment area, and simple little me didn't realise how big WA was. It's a huge state, and you'd have people coming in that had 160-kilometre motor vehicle accidents up north, that were airlifted in and in bad way, and I think the intensity of the trauma that we saw over in WA was more than I've seen anywhere else, definitely. So I think it was just a different experience to what I had seen in New South Wales, in Newcastle and Sydney. So it was another step up. And then the way that people deal with that is slightly different again.
Yeah. But then once you're done here, you don't stop moving.
I would have loved to have stayed in WA, and the opportunity to go to Brisbane popped up, and my wife was pregnant at the time, and as good as WA is, it's a long way away, and when you're over there with the time zone difference, it feels like you are in a different country. So we put a request in to come back to the East Coast somewhere, because my wife was pregnant at the time, and our families are all East Coast side. So there wasn't anything in New South Wales at the time, and nothing in Newcastle, and Brisbane were able to offer me a job. Dr Benezetic and Dr Martin Batstone both. I had spoken to them previously and were great, and they again, were people that stuck their necks out to offer me a job and give me an opportunity, and that's something I'll thank them for, because Brisbane's been amazing and I've never looked back.
Yeah, I mean, talk to me about this time, because a lot of people that go through a specialist program are talking to me about how, it's intense, like the amount of hours you're putting in, and then you've got the weekends just kind of catching up on all of that kind of stuff. I mean, you just mentioned your wife was pregnant at this time, and she had to drop everything, move with you to Perth, and then, there's just so many factors. Can you talk to me about, once you're kind of going through all this studying, everything else, how do you balance all of that at the same time?
Look, I think medical specialty training across the board is difficult, and dental specialty training. You don't always get the location that's ideal for you, and it's very difficult for the colleges and the training centres to take into consideration kids and things like that. There's certain jobs. For example, here in Queensland, there's a Gold Coast job, a Townsville job, some Brisbane jobs, but there's always someone that's got to go to Townsville or the Gold Coast. Otherwise, you're leaving those centres understaffed, and so it's hard. You move around. I think you go into these programs understanding that you just have to deal with that. You have to move. You have to be ready to pick up and go whenever you get an opportunity. And I think largely there's an understanding of that. I think it's difficult, and every year we have, I guess, issues around where do we put people, and try to take into consideration those other factors that pop up. It's not easy, and I think as best as the training centres can do, they will take stuff into consideration, but it's part of the training program. It's not easy, but it's when you go into it, I think you understand that.
Yeah, I guess because there's only so many positions available each year, and there's so many, and then there's more and more applicants every time, because it becomes like a bottleneck, right? As they always say in medicine, and so I guess to your point, you just got to kind of take your opportunities as they come. How was your partner taking it all? Was it something that was discussed earlier on when you're kind of getting into it? I don't know, but is she a dentist, doctor, kind of having that kind of health side of understanding of things, or?
Yeah, so George is amazing. She's a dermatologist, so she did medicine and did a specialty training in dermatology, and luckily, or to her credit, she smashed that and got through that, before we left to go to Perth, before we had kids. So she did really well there. But I guess being medical and understanding that process, she knew that we would have to pick up and move and be nomads for a couple of years. And I think having someone that understands that is super important. I think, and I've got huge respect for the female trainees that we have that are pregnant mid-training. It's difficult. It's very difficult, and you've got to have a kid, and then you've still got to go back and study and get through training, and that's not easy, and you can't always plan it properly, I'm sure, as we know.
Yeah, 100%. I think at this point, you can't plan for everything. Hey, so you're at Brisbane and you're working there, you're doing your time, but that you also don't stop there. You end up, is that right?
Well, I did my fellowship, so I went and did a fellowship training down in Melbourne. Once I'd gotten through, so I failed my final year exams when I was in final year, and that was because I wasn't ready. I was undercooked. I can make excuses for it, but ultimately I hadn't done the study and hadn't spent the time getting myself prepped. and doing a final year specialist exam gives you a real understanding of what's involved. Until you get there, you really don't understand, and it's a huge volume of work that you have to cover and be ready for. And I was just undercooked, and so that was actually probably the best thing that had happened to me. To that point was a real kick in the ass when I failed, to say, you can't just fly by the seat of your pants. You sort of got to get stuck in and get through and do it properly. And having that year to go back and review everything really made me a better surgeon, because I'd gone over, I really knew my stuff the second time around. I was confident. I'd had so much more experience and exposure, and I think it's character building. You get a kick like that, you sort of it toughens you a bit. So did that, got through my fellowship training, and then I had always been into surgery and the possibility of that. And I think largely we haven't treated just with TMJ probably as well as we potentially could. But there's a saying: if you want to find the best person in the world that does it, and go and learn off them, and that's what I did. So I went down to Melbourne and hung off the shoulder of Dr George Dimitroulis down there. So that was largely just doing TMJ. I worked with Dr Patricia Boardbar and Dr Ricky Kumar doing a lot of orthognathic surgery. They do a lot of orthognathic and implant surgery. So, and they are extremely good at what they do. So hanging around those guys and just functioning at a different level was great.
I mean, you're saying you actively sought after them? Is that what happened?
Yeah, so for George, George had an established fellowship, which was great. So, but I had that pegged from a while, from a couple of years previous to when I was ready to apply. I knew that he had established that fellowship probably 2 years before I was ready to apply. So, that was something I was really keen on. So that was a bit harder to talk my wife into, that's for sure, because we were just getting into our second. We'd just had our second child, and we were then we had no money, and we had to move to Melbourne in the middle of winter and survive. So that was interesting. Interesting chat with my wife, that one was. But again, she amazing. She packed up and came to Melbourne, and we had a great time. And that period of time, that fellowship, was probably where I surgically learned, the most. When you've done everything and you know the most you're going to probably know from a theory point of view. Just consolidating your surgical skills and having that time to do that in that period was just awesome.
Yeah. Can you talk to me about that experience? Like when you were there, like you said, you've got all this theory, and then you've got someone who's going to help guide you through the process of it. How intense was it? What was kind of happening? Was it kind of like he would be there by your side, kind of going through it, or is it like you would have to case present it to him, or is it kind of you're just on your own and you just kind of have to figure it out, and then you kind of lean on him for more guidance?
No, it's an intensive process. I think it's day one, turn up. I had met George previously, but turn up, and there's a couple of cases to do. He's like, all right, I'm going to do the first one, and then you do the next one, and I'm going to do it with you. And you're straight into it, and you're just doing surgeries, these types of high-end surgeries that you just haven't had exposure to previously, repeatedly, one after the other, multiple times a week. And you're really just honing your specific skills on this stuff. And at this stage, you go from being a junior burger registrar to being a colleague, and it's more of a colleague teaching situation rather than a consultant registrar relationship, which was great. I think you are given the opportunity to show what you can do, but at the same time you're getting really led through the processes, and same with Dr Boardbar and Dr Kumar. It's sort of gradually, they would let you do more and more and show you how they do it and what are their techniques, and the generosity of these guys is amazing. They're not holding back on teaching you stuff. It's sort of, this is, they've done the hard yards, and they've got to a point where they are super good at what they do, and they're happy to share that skill set with you and show you how they do it. And I was always blown away with that. The generosity was amazing, but it's something that I can then take those skills and go back to where I come from and use those skills, and I'm very thankful to those people for that opportunity. I think it was a intense but really rewarding experience and very immersive. You're in it all the time, and you're there. But it's a great opportunity because they're taking all the responsibility. You're there as an additional hand, I guess, really, helping and being involved as much as you can. But the responsibility and the stress really falls on those guys. So you've got an opportunity to really just get in and hone your skills and get as good as you can at what you're doing, without necessarily having the responsibility and the stress. That all comes pretty solidly once you get back and start practice.
Yeah. So once this finishes, this is when you decide you're going to move back and settle down in Brisbane. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, our options were to go to Newcastle, where our family is, or go to Brisbane, really. No one can afford to live in Sydney at the moment, so it wasn't going to go to Sydney. Yes. And without a doubt, Brisbane was, from a professional perspective, the opportunities that were there, the people that I was able to work with. And one of the things I really love about Queensland, Max Fax, is the camaraderie is very good. There's a really good feel amongst the consultants up here and the registrars, but the group is very tight. Everyone does their best and gets in and really contributes, and it's and gets on. And I think that makes your working life that much better. If you can share your experiences and the intensity of the work that we do with your colleagues, it makes your life that much better.
Yeah. Can I ask, for some people that are thinking about specializing and going down this path of MFS, is that, when you talk about those times when, you didn't get the first round offer, or you get knocked back, what can you say to them if they're either going through it or planning to go through it, or something to expect? I don't know. I'm just thinking, if you get knocked back after the first round, you're probably devastated, or I don't know. You're thinking about how do you plan for the next year, what happens and all of that.
Yeah, it's difficult, but it's such a life enriching process, I guess, in a way, because you really become quite introspective. I think all of us have gone through dentistry or medicine or whatever you've done and have been reasonably successful at getting to that point. I think I failed year 9 geography at one stage because I got north, east, south, west around the wrong way. That was the only exam that I'd failed up until that point, and that's probably largely the story with most of us, is that no one has really faced academic adversity. I'm sure there's lots of stories of adversity otherwise, but academic adversity, when you get through high school, you do pretty well. You get to a point where you get to uni and you sort of fluff your way through uni, or well, I did anyway. I think all of a sudden you hit with a situation where you think, oh, bloody hell, I'm not as good as I think I am. And you've got to really have a good look at yourself, and it's a really good opportunity to go what am I doing that's stopping me from getting to this next stage, and what can I do to get there? I think that ability to look at yourself and be objective about the way that you are doing things is a really positive thing that I took out of it anyway. I think that having a plan is really important. Having a plan B is really important. I think you have to think about where you're going and where you want to be, but how can you get there, and what is potentially an alternate route? How do you diversify your skill set to say, okay, this is where I want to get to, but potentially, I might need to take a different route, and if that different route doesn't lead to that point, am I going to be able to use that skill set to go into something that I'll be happy with? I think sitting down and saying, you're not always going to get your plan A is really important. And that was part of my thought process when I initially was getting some experience in plastic surgery and general surgery and things like that. And you sort of have those opportunities there. It's always nice for people to say, I was always going to be a Maxillofacial surgeon. I was always dedicated to it. That was the only thing I ever thought about and dreamt about, and went to sleep thinking about taking out wisdom teeth. But the reality is that there's a lot of dually qualified people out there that don't end up doing Maxillofacial for a whole heap of different reasons. I think the hits that you get will make you better. It's just about how you respond to those hits. And I think it's really to be able to be really objective in your self-evaluation is really important from that point of view.
Yeah. I thought you were using footy analogies for a second, the amount of hits that you take.
Yeah, well, I've had a few decent hits in footy, but not as many as I've had in Maxillofacial, I don't think so.
So some of the listeners would probably think, you had things good. Your father already owned a dental practice. Why not just continue as a GP and just take over the business? Talk to me about practice ownership and all of that.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I've been asked it many times. Why would I leave that opportunity? I think at the time, my thinking was probably more selfish in a way, in the sense that I wanted to do more in terms of study for myself. And that was a partially a selfish thought from that point of view. But also, I think there was a part of me that wasn't as dedicated to the business aspect of running a dental practice. I remember Dad coming home and telling me that at least 40% of his time was dealing with staffing issues and business problems rather than being a clinician, and that didn't appeal to me really. I'm not a born businessman, and I think that part of me going back into specialist training was that, in a way, you're kicking the can down the road a bit. You're still going to have to run a small business at some stage, but that wasn't something that really appealed to me at that point in time. I think Dad had a really good crew where he was working. He didn't need me, although I think he was obviously pretty disappointed when I not disappointed, but I think he would have loved to have had me, in the practice to go forward, and I would have loved to have stayed there. It was a great opportunity. But again, I was 23, I was young. The experiences I've had since then have been amazing and shaped the person I am now. So I wouldn't take any of it back. So it's funny, in retrospect, I think it's actually worked out well. From a business perspective, it's probably a bit cleaner for Dad because he can, on-sell that practice, doesn't have to worry about, how it works with me and my brothers and sisters and how that all works out. And because, that can always be an interesting little process. But at the time, it was probably a more of a selfish thing to say, I'm not ready for this. I want to go and do more study. And that was probably my thought process at the time.
So, to your point, not great at business, you want to kick the can down the road, and then you end up being an oral surgeon. You have to open up your own practice, and you decide to pick up an MBA?
Yeah, well, the MBA was a bit of a weird one. I actually applied for the MBA when I was doing an ICU term back in Newcastle. That was in 2013, I think it was, and I was doing night shift in ICU, and I'd just passed my primaries exam for Max Fax, and I thought, I don't have anything to do for the next 4 years. I might as well do something. And I thought, well, I should probably do something that's more business orientated, because I'm not a businessman. And I started looking at courses, and this Sydney Uni MBA was starting. So it was the very first year of the Sydney Uni MBA at that point in time, and I put an application in. It was probably like 2 a.m. in the morning, and watching 3 patients trying not to die in ICU, and then I got an interview and went to the interview, and then got offered a position in the MBA. And the MBA was another, pretty amazing opportunity, really. Sydney Uni is obviously my alma mater, and I was very keen to do it there. And it was a really good program, intensive, and not so much, how to read a financial statement, although that did come up as part of it. But a lot of it was dealing with a whole bunch of people that we don't get the opportunity to in medicine or dentistry. In my group, I think I had a guy who was in counter-terrorism in New South Wales Police. There was researchers, cardiac researchers. There was nurses. There was a lot of consultants, they call themselves, but basically people in business that don't know what they're doing next, and so they call themselves consultants. That's what I found out what that means. But but it was great to have exposure to those types of people and interact with them and see how things are done in different worlds, and open my eyes up to how presentations should be done properly, how things should be presented, to a board, and how that works, and high level, I guess, management skills, which has been, I think, very good. Without being able to tell you specifically a particular skill that I've taken out of it that's been really good, I think it's a lot of soft skills that you get that build up and really give you a really solid education about the world. One of the courses we did was a financial course, and a lot of it was about analysing petrol prices for airplanes and looking at how that works. But part of that was looking at financial statements and understanding what a financial statement means and how that interacts with the company business model and how you interpret that. And you wouldn't really get that opportunity to do that otherwise. I mean, you can do short courses and look at that sort of stuff, but the holistic way that the MBA is put together was really pretty amazing. The difficult thing was that Sydney Uni wanted me to be there in person, so I had to fly back from WA and Brisbane when I was at both of those places to do weekend courses, which was expensive and tiring, but it was a great experience, and I think I was really glad I did that in the end, even though it made life hard for a while.
Yeah, I mean, and do you think that's kind of helped in your day-to-day now, being, a practice owner?
100%. Like, I think one of the biggest skills that I think I took away from the MBA was delegation. As dentists and doctors, we probably tend to be more freaks in a way. We like to have everything at the tip of our fingers and know exactly what's going on all the time. But one of the biggest skills I think you develop in especially in the MBA that I did was understanding that there's a lot of people out there with skills better than you that can do the job in half the time and twice as well as you can, and utilizing other people's skills to get you an efficient business or practice or whatever you're trying to do is super important. So, when I looked at setting up the practice, it was, how do I do this in a way that is less hands-on for me? Having seen what Dad went through with his practice and the way he ran his practice, how can I do it so I don't have to be as hands-on? And so, all our software is cloud, so you don't have to have issues with servers and problems like that. I mean, that's we're lucky we're in the time we're in, because you can get away with that. You couldn't do that 10 years ago, but now we had to have that opportunity. But that was one thing. So a lot of our stuff is remote. Our practice manager is off-site, practice off-site, and so all of these types of situations come about because you can delegate well to create those opportunities, and I think helps to run a business with lower overheads generally. That's the hope. It's probably, I'm probably kidding myself, but that's the hope. But I definitely think that it has helped. That, as well as interpersonal skills that you don't get otherwise. I think interacting with different people and a wider breadth of people is a really important skill to have across the board. I think that's something that is hard to get and important in dealing with the people that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So what's your current day-to-day look like? What kind of procedures are you kind of getting up to?
Well, at the moment, I've got COVID, so I woke up this morning, had some Panadol, and went back to bed for about an hour. So, but no, from a work perspective, it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays are largely my private practice days. So I'll get up and head in. Generally, I've got an operating list in the morning, so we start at 8 a.m. and then I consult through the afternoon. So seeing patients in the rooms until sort of 4 or 5 o'clock, or probably 5 o'clock. And then you get stuck there doing dictations and letters for half an hour. So when I came back from Melbourne, I was really keen to try and set up my life close so that I didn't have to move long way between places. So my private hospitals and my practice are all within each other. So I'll operate in the morning and I'll bounce into my rooms at lunchtime and be there, and I can be there in 10 minutes, although I'm usually late. My staff tell me I'm always late, but I try and get there on time. And so, Tuesday is generally a big operating day. If I do joint replacements or larger joint procedures, then I'll do those on a Tuesday. And again, consulting in the afternoon. I try not to do a full day of something. It sends me a bit spare. If I have to operate all day or consult all day, I don't cope very well. So I recognise that. So I sort of have a half day of operating, half day of consults, or vice versa. And then, generally Wednesday I'll have a few patients in hospital by that stage. So I'll do a ward round in the morning, 7:30, 7 o'clock, and then you're operating again on a Wednesday morning. And then Thursday is my Thursday and Friday are basically my public day. So on the Thursday I work at the Mater Public Hospital. So we'll consult in the morning and operate in the afternoon usually. And the public hospital stuff is great because you get a wider variety of presentations. You get a bit of trauma, you get a bit of weirdness that pops up every now and then. And then on a Friday morning is a bit of a mixed bag in the morning. So I'll often do some teaching registrars once a month. It's often a morning for me to catch up on letters or other stuff that's hanging around. And in the afternoon, I work at the Queensland Children's Hospital. So I'll do an operating list or a consult. We do a multidisciplinary clinic there once a week. And and then generally we scoot to the pub on a Friday afternoon for a quick beer before I go home and meet chaos with the kids.
So would you say this is your ideal clinical week, or are you hoping that it might be a little bit different in 5 years' time? And if so, how do you want to get there?
I'd like to probably have another half a week. I think, potentially I'm looking at a Wednesday afternoon off. I think just having that little break just to catch up on paperwork and stuff. I think I really overdid it last year and the year before. I think I got reasonably burnt out by the end of the year, and partially that was probably a bit of COVID, because we just didn't plan holidays or go away. So I just worked all the way through and didn't really have time off, and so it was partly that, probably partly that I overdid it a bit. So I think, the plan is to, and we have put that in place, to have Wednesday afternoon semi-blocked off for me to catch up on paperwork, and because that stuff gets away on you, your letters get away on you, your surgical planning gets away on you, and you end up sitting up doing it at 10 o'clock at night when you really, shouldn't be. So, that's another thing that I'm really trying not to do is sit up at night doing work. I've often, and last year I was doing a lot, was sitting up till 11 or midnight, typing letters, catching up on emails, doing stuff. I think that it makes you tired for the next day. You're probably not putting in your best work when you're doing it, and it's not a long-term viable, sustainable way to do those things. So I think you have to create time in your week to do it, which comes at the cost of you earning money, but at the same time that's something you have to do, because it's at the cost of your sanity, really, in the long term. So and I'm a big not working. After having done a lot of weekends going through my training, I'm a big I refuse to work on weekends. So I think that's a big motivator for me to have everything sorted by Friday 4:30 p.m. when the pub time comes around.
So, you own your own patents on particular medical devices. How did that come about? And was that because there was some influence from some of your mentors, who I think is it Dr. George, who also seems to have invented other medical devices?
Yeah, George is a real, very much, well, he's far more of an entrepreneur than I am. He's gotten a long way down the road with a lot of his devices and has done very well with that. For me, it was all came about while I was in medical school. I was trying to work out how I could develop a passive income, how I could develop a secondary stream of income, and so I was looking at other ways that I could potentially do that. So, I looked at this post-operative ice pack device that I sort of had developed and had it patented and had it developed in China or manufactured in China, and sent it out, and that was a really fun experience. It was a really expensive experience. I think I wasted a lot of money while doing it, but it was something that that I've learnt from, and it slowed up a lot while I was going through training and obviously getting through my exams, and it's at a stage now where I'm ready to pick that up again. I think I learned a lot from that first go at setting up a potential business and going through that process. I definitely wasn't efficient, and I definitely wasn't good at from an organisational perspective at getting things going from that business perspective. But I think now I've had that opportunity, and I think I'm ready to launch back into it. I think the biggest thing that you find is, if you're going to do something like that, you've got to commit a lot of time to it. You can't just do it as a side job, say you're doing being a maxillofacial surgeon, you can't just do it as something that you do between 9 and 11 at night. It just doesn't work. You really have to dedicate a solid amount of time to getting that going. So it is effectively, you have to look at it as a second job. And I think that's the biggest thing that I learned, was that I was doing it on the side, not committing the right time to it, wasting money because of that. And it was an inefficient process. If I had my time again, you would, commit 2 full days a week to it and get it going and just smash it out. And I think you'd have a far higher chance of success at doing that. But obviously that's a daunting thing to do, because, you need an income, you need money coming in to pay for the things that you want to do and invest in. And that's not an easy decision to make. So it was a good experience. I think I'll do it a lot better the second time around if I get the opportunity to, and I'm hopefully excited to do that. But it was fun.
I mean, if you're going to pick that up whilst you're doing everything that's going on right now, you're going to be sleeping till like 2 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, I know. Yeah, find time. That's the key. I don't know where you can find time. Maybe I will have to work Saturdays.
So, just to wrap it all up, if you could share any words of wisdom to your younger self, what would it be?
Back yourself. Take the opportunities when they come, and don't be rattled by having setbacks. Don't take it personally when you have setbacks. I think it's character building, and it's important to have those times to really look at yourself and do a self audit and work out how do you take the next step forward. I think that's really important from a professional point of view, is how to objectively look at yourself while you're doing what you're doing, and that's an ongoing thing. Keep having fun, definitely.
Well, Dr. Michael Burgess, thank you for coming on the show today. If you could let the people know how they can find you or what you've got going on in your life.
Thanks for having me. I think this is a really great platform. As we were talking earlier about, the great job that you're doing putting this on, and I think it's you've got a great selection of people that you've had previously, and I think you're doing a really great thing putting this together and getting this out to people. It's a credit to you that you've put so much effort into it. So thank you for having me. I'm in Brisbane. Google me.
Thank you. So for our viewers, if you like this episode, drop a comment below on your favorite part, but don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode of CPD Junkie Podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.